they try to achieve their ends by working entirely behind the scenes, corrupting and deceiving the public. The aims of such groups may be either good or bad, so far as the public interest is concerned, but their methods are a grave danger to democratic institutions.
I don't know if you saw my posts about her, but like I had some fairly popular posts about like that fucking thread that one guy wrote about her like routine or whatever. So I've become pretty well acquainted with her, or at least her business model in the past couple days.
Oh yeah, you sub.
I become pretty familiar with her work. I had to do some research, but
yeah, I'm not a retard, man. I would never pay for that. She has pictures all over the internet.
There's e-girls out there that'll DM me their feed for free. I'm not paying for it.
Yeah.
all because they want to get on the podcast. They're looking for the podcast clout.
Exactly.
We'll wet our beaks,
But yeah,
have a taste.
But her thing annoys me because she's like doing like she's doing like the quirky girl thing, like trying to be like smart about it, like trying to be smart.
Yeah,
that's really annoying.
Mm-hmm.
Like apparently she's been a whore for years. Like she's been doing porn and posting news and everything for literally years, and I had no idea.
No, I remember.
And
I remember. Like, did you see that like really gay gnome thing she did? Like that.
Yes, yeah, man.
No, like I saw that on Reddit like years and years ago. Like when I was still on Reddit. So she.
What is this gnome thing?
Oh, like
Gnome Chomsky?
No, like like a garden gnome. Like that's like the whole quirky, lolsa random Reddit shit where like it's like pictures of her spreading her gash. And then, like, so randomly, she, like, sets it up that, like, garden gnomes are, like, stalking her in these pictures.
Yeah.
It's weird. I don't know.
And then they start feeling her up and dragging her out of the frame and everything. And she's, like, screaming in fear. And that's what the whole picture set is. Sort of the entire, like, Reddit e-horror aesthetic captured in one, like, quirky little photo set.
Exactly. Oh,
God, that's awful.
Not only is she, Not only does she have nice tits, but she's smart and quirky. It's the Redditor, he combs his pants, he cooms himself, thinking about this smart. We were talking about that with like Blabber, like Sasha Grey, how like she would like flout the fact that she read Dostoevsky and Kafka and shit, like like the whole smart whore thing.
It's and that like none of the people that are like getting like allegedly turned on by the fact that she's like so smart and she reads like this highbrow literature, none of them actually read that stuff either. They're just like they're turned on by the idea of like a smart woman, quote unquote, or just a nerd woman. Like that, like a couple days ago I posted about this, like the specific like draw of this AL a bitch and her whole business model. I'm sure I did both of you guys saw that thread that I think his name was I have the thread right here. Sam Parr wrote about like her like her average business day, like what she does. Like there was this one post, and I wasn't the only one to pick up on it. Like I'll just read it here. 11:30 a.m. I make coffee and film a short video called The Naked Morning Coffee Chat, where I'm either topless or naked and talk to the camera about my thoughts or rant about something that's been on my mind. I post this a few times a week, and it's not to try and connect better, and it's to try to connect better with my subscribers. This is no makeup, hair messy, very relaxed. Like that's the whole like draw with like the parasocial like Onlyfans kind of thing, like it's the nerd like sexual ideation of the approachable girl. The girl,
it's like the girlfriend experience kind of thing, basically.
Yeah, or like the friends with benefits kind of thing. It's just like, oh, it's a friend, but we fuck. It's sexuality neutered of its like dramatic and perilous potential and made easy and approachable. It's no longer this thing that nerds are scared of, because nerds are actually scared of sexuality. It's something that they have. It's something that all men have to some degree like overcome, like just in the act of like the mere act of approaching a woman. But like nerds are especially bad with it, and nerds are the types who actively seek out like fantasy material and fantasy media in order to circumvent that need to overcome it, you know? So like that's sort of like her draw, is just like the easy and approachable girl that it nonetheless like is sexual, but it's sexual in like a very like unerotic and very pornographic way, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, no, that's what really like stuck out to me with that one specific scenario you brought up, where it's like, oh, like the messy hair, no makeup, coffee chat. That's like that's more pornographic than like most actual pornography, where it's like, because you can envision a scenario where it's like, oh, you're waking up with your girlfriend, oh, and your girlfriend's naked, and you're having coffee in the morning, and that's like a scenario you can play, that's sort of like a domestic situation. But it's like, but you're not actually, she's not looking at you as you do it. She's recording this video and sending out, to thousands of different people. But you're
that's the parasocial dynamic at that point.
But you're like partaking in it, like that's what it like plays on in your lizard mind, your lizard part of your brain, where it's like, oh, this is I'm self-inserting into a scenario. It's like,
yeah, and like the thing you mentioned, like waking up with your girlfriend and she's like, or your wife or whatever, and she's like naked, and then like you go and like you have coffee, and like that is like the kind of thing that happens like late into a relationship, when you're like very comfortable with each other and you've earned like that sort of very casual but then nonetheless like very touching intimacy with one another.
right.
But notice that and that's like that is like late into the relationship kind of thing, like months or years at that point, like where you're that comfortable with each other. But like these people, they want it immediately. Like that is like, it's an inherently attractive thing to a guy, it's just like a horny fantasy. And that was like any guy has fantasized about that, I imagine. But it's something hard to get, and it's something and the nature of this media that delivers that fantasy removes that effort, removes that struggle. It makes it easy, and in so doing, it sterilizes it and makes it pornographic. Because eroticism is specifically that element of sexuality, or stems from specifically that element of sexuality that actually is perilous, and actually does like it like have like a dual element to it, of like pleasure or potential for pleasure, and potential for consequence, or something fraught with consequence. It's like sex itself, like intercourse removed from the potentiality of making a child, just becomes like pressing a button just to come. Like this is a pleasure button.
Yeah, it's like completely like there's like a like the procreative aspect of it like always has to be a part, otherwise it is sort of like a mechanical thing.
Yeah.
And you sort of like remove the sexuality from it, and that's why that's sort of like an unattractive element to like not like more so than just like, oh, that the town whore is like unattractive because she's a whore, but like sort of like the woman, like the career woman on birth control has like a sterility to her that makes her less attractive, and like removing like a lot of
like, you literally can't imagine that kind of person like being intimate. Like you may be able to imagine them being naked or whatever, and being naked and being pornographic. Like you can imagine them in a pornographic context, but they're no longer like sexual in that way, or erotic. It just completely strips it.
Yeah, it's like almost like the organic aspect of it is stripped out, and you are just left with this like purely mechanical, like a simulation of like what the sexual aspect is.
It's like power tool sexuality. It's like you're so fucking desensitized that you can't come if you're not using power tools, or some kind of toy that's hyper realistically like stimulating.
They're all joy from Blade Runner 2049, basically.
yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah. No, like the two incel movies, Blade Runner 2049 and Her. I was thinking about that.
Oh my god, Her, man.
Where
that movie.
I mean, yeah, it's a good movie, but it is one of those things where it's like
no. I got it. No, real quick. I don't like that movie. That was like a painful. That was like pain in my voice. I don't want to. I make no mistake. That movie like hurt to watch.
Yeah, but it is one of those things where it's like that's like even before, it's almost prescient, but like even before like OnlyFans, like when that movie come out, 2013, OnlyFans and shit like that wasn't really a thing. But now it is these things for sort of like quote unquote normal girls. You can have sort of these parasocial, parasexual relations with them. And meanwhile, they may as well be an AI that you're talking to. You know, it's like they don't know you. It's like a completely detached, semi-automated thing that they do for money.
Yeah, I mean, like you're talking about the prescience of it. Like, speaking of like AI and power tool sexuality and like the parasocial relationship and like the parasocial dynamic, like hype it like there's a pretty good YouTube channel called Glink, and he made a documentary a couple months ago about OnlyFans content creators. I hate that fucking word. About OnlyFans whores and the guys who spend money on them. And a lot of the girls he talked to that were making content, they all talked about like how it's like a full-time job responding to guys, because like that's what they're looking for. They're looking for that response. So like every girl, like hypothetically, like there's like a perfect OnlyFans girl, and she's she's prolific in the content she makes. She's hyper responsive to every guy that's DMing her, and hyper personal as well. It's just a robot. It's just the AI from her. Sam, what was the operating system's name, right? Like Samantha or something.
I think
remember
so.
correctly.
I think so.
Yeah, it's Samantha from her. Like it's just an AI that like is like perfectly tailored to like cater to this like parasocial ideation of yours, and it's ultimately something that isn't exclusive either. Like, you remember the ending scene in her, where Joaquin Phoenix is talking to the robot, and she's like, I'm in relationships with like 700,000 other men or something like that. You remember?
Yeah.
And like that when you look at what OnlyFans is now, it's like, yeah, in a sense, like the girl that these guys are spending money on, she's in a relationship with all like the other like a million guys that are spending money on her and DMing her, and it's the same deal, except she's not as attentive to every single one of them as an AI can be, So she's imperfectly parasocial. So in some way, like we're moving away from like power tools, like parasocial power tool sexuality, and into like parasocial AI sexuality, because it's just that much more perfectly parasocial.
Well, I was just thinking, because it's like one of the myths I feel like that OnlyFans perpetuates is that it's like easy money. And from like the way these like freaking like schedules look, it looks absolutely time consuming.
Yeah.
And so it's not just a matter of like, post hole for like 30 minutes a day and you can pay off your student loans kind of thing. It eventually becomes utterly consuming, and everything in your life begins to revolve around it. And like they become as chained to it as the simps who subscribe to them. And so ultimately it's like, well, you should have just become an old fashioned hooker or stripper in the first place, because it's not like you're saving time. I
mean, but again, like that is like the nature of a parasocial relationship. Like parasocial relationship isn't like a recent thing. Like it was first described in the 1900s, and in response to the rise of celebrity culture, like people like identifying super hard with this new class of celebrities and just becoming obsessed with them. Like it wasn't OnlyFans that started the parasocial relationship. It's definitely a much more powerful manifestation of it, but it was the celebrity, like the archetypal celebrity who began like the phenomenon of the parasocial relationship. And the thing about that is that like celebrities, it's long been like a critique of celebrities that they're kind of like dominated and enslaved by the nature of being a celebrity. Like just like you're saying with the OnlyFans girls, like they're dominated and enslaved by like the nature of being an OnlyFans girl. And it takes like a very neurotic and mentally ill person to seek that out and then to thrive in that territory.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because because the girl we were talking about before seems to be like one of the more successful ones, and it seems to me like one of the reasons why she's more successful is not that because she's the best looking one, but because she's developing and like sustaining these parasocial relationships. So like spending hours a day responding to messages to make people think, these sad sacks of shit that message her, make them think that they actually do have a genuine connection with her. And like that's like how she builds up the following, because if someone just posts their pussy online, a couple times a day, you could probably make a bit of money with that. But it seems like she's making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month.
1.2 million, man. That's what I heard.
Yeah, 1.2 million a year.
Insane.
And it's like, and doing that in part because you're nurturing these sort of detrimental parasocial relationships by like fooling these suckers into thinking like, oh no, you actually do have some sort of connection with me.
Yeah, like we talked about last time with nice white parents. It's like it's like the way in which like the system, quote unquote, works is that like it selects for very like maladaptive and very evil types of people. Like those are the types of people who succeed in the system, and it's no different with Onlyfans and the parasocial relationship game. Like it's a brutal, like just impossibly brutal and cynical sociopath type of like sociopathic kind of person who can curate like analytically curate like 1,000 different guys DMing you and trying to like create a relationship or like curate a relationship with all like 1,000 of those guys, because you can't do that if you actually feel anything for any of these guys aside from just the incentive of getting money from them from a job well done, in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
like there's no humanity in the act of curating that many different parasocial relationships with that many people. Absolutely fucking none. It's like a robotic task almost. It's like cruel in the way only a machine can be.
Or a woman.
Same difference, of course.
Of course.
But like I said, I didn't know until like this week that she's been a whore for as long as she has been. Like she's been posting this shit for years. OnlyFans is of course more recent because OnlyFans itself is more recent, but she has been posting nudes for years. But like, so all I knew her from was her like rationalist, like shitty, like less wrong Twitter account, where like she would occasionally post like insanely obtuse polls about like, is there really something wrong with pedophilia? Is there really something wrong with necrophilia? Like those are two that I remember very specifically. And like when you put that into the context of what she does for a living, because this really is her fucking living. It kind of goes, it reveals like how cynically and deliberately this girl is looking for new niches. I guarantee you if she could, she would try and to feed into the necrophile demographic and the pedophile demographic and so forth. And once again, with the whole normalization of like LGBT and like sexuality under capitalism, like it's to her benefit. The larger the potential consumer base for her market share, let's say, for her product is, like the more she stands to gain from it. So like every time she goes and she posts some like insanely obtuse thread or poll or whatever about how there's actually nothing wrong with like given sexual taboo, she's just trying to expand her market share.
Yeah, it's an underserved community.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely up and coming too. I'm sure you guys saw that law that was recently passed in California.
Oh no, that's so fucked up. Because I was like I'm like, it couldn't really be this, but no, it does seem that it's like 15-year-old boys and it's like some gay congressman that passed it too. That's like photographs of him,
bro,
like leather and shit. And it's like no,
it's the same. It's the same Jewish faggot that like literally Jewish faggot that authored and then subsequently managed to pass that legislation in California that lowered the penalty for willingly exposing someone to HIV from a felony to a misdemeanor. Like it's the same guy. It's the same fucking guy.
That rat face.
Yeah, I think his name is Joseph Wiener. His last name is literally fucking Wiener, man. And it's literally.
No,
like he is like a parody of everything, of fucking all like of the entire like subversive Jewish stereotype. It's pretty funny.
No, like sometime I'd like to like look at his legislative record and see if it's literally just like passing fag shit, like giving HIV to children, like those are the only laws he passes, and there's nothing about like, tax reform or anything like that. I wonder if that's the kind of shit that he's putting out, and just no one's noticed that. Hey, wait a minute, this Jewish guy is only passing pedophile bills. We gotta maybe keep an eye on him.
I mean, in a couple of years, like 10 years ago or so, like people would keep an eye on that behavior, but now it's just like, oh, he's gay, he has his own interests, and it's fine. Like gays are just like now like their own interest group, and everyone knows what they want. But like now that's normalized. It's like it's totally fine for them to just be like kind of mask off, advocating for their degenerate interests.
I don't know. It's honestly it's upsetting. I mean, there's nothing we can do about it. Is the thing.
Yeah.
It's like no one even cares. Like
yeah, it was pertinent. It was pertinent though.
Yeah. No, but sort of just going back to this girl, I think like Eric Weinstein is another one of these guys that really annoys me. But like he'll like hang around these whores. So like this girl is like retweeting Eric Weinstein and like Wesley Yang and shit like that. And it's like I think one of these rationalist guys, it was a different thread, but talking about like how brilliant she was and like under his like public accounts. Like, so I'm sure that he's not looking at, the millions of ass pictures that she posts on Reddit. It was like, oh no, her Twitter account, she's like really informed and a really high IQ individual, and I respect her as a colleague. And all these sort of rationalist guys, like, I don't know, they're all like sort of just like these sort of stunted, impotent perverts, but that they sort of betray that fact of themselves.
The intellectual dark web is a gateway to OnlyFans whoring.
I saw. I got shared.
It's not even a gateway. It's just like one step removed.
It's in the same ecosystem. But I saw.
Yeah, exactly.
But speaking of fucking Eric Weinstein, he did like this interview with like some porn star. I can't remember her name, but it was like so funny because he's like this like sort of like nebbish Jewish nerd, and he's like praising her for the way that. She's like, oh, breaking down boundaries, and you know what? Maybe we're the prudish ones, and the whores and the porn stars are the ones that have it figured out. And it's like trying to do this real big brained analysis, and meanwhile he's just like sort of like shifting awkwardly in his chair the entire time, and I don't know. It's just it's these people sort of indulging their perversions and thinking that no one notices, like thinking they're too smart to be like. For people to recognize what it is. It's like, oh no, I'm going to sit down and have this conversation with a porn star, and we'll have a really engaging conversation. It's like, no, you're not. You're just indulging yourself.
Yeah,
these sapiosexuals.
Oh no,
it's not even that they're like the sapiosexual thing is a meme, obviously, but like their whole claim is that they're attracted to intelligence. Like we said this almost at the very beginning, I think like it's the idea of like a smart girl, it's the idea of a girl who's just like me, because like, of course these people all think they're fucking geniuses, they think that their primary identity is of like the really smart dude who is like really up and up on all world issues, and he's all like into math and science and everything, and he loves Neil deGrasse Tyson and all like the standard normie like I'm so smart style things.
Exactly.
It's not that they actually are smart, like you saw Sasha Grey and Dostoevsky. It's not like any of these guys that like the fact or think they like the fact that she reads that shit or actually read it. It's just the idea of it turns them on because it's like this weird like curated identity to have for themselves.
Yeah,
I'm smart. This girl is smart. Oh boy.
Exactly. Oh, she plays video games too. Oh boy. Oh geez.
Yes. And again, it just goes back to like removing like the peril from sexuality. It's like no one is exactly like you, least of all a woman. It's like
exactly.
It's like the girl you find is not going to be you. She's probably not even going to be like you. And that's fine. That's just fine. But like
that's like good
people,
probably.
Yeah, exactly. It's complimentary in that way. Yeah. But like these people want that shit because it makes it easier for them. It makes them easier to conceptualize the relationship. It makes it seem more approachable for them. And it's also just like very built into like the consumer mindset of like, oh man, like she likes the same products I do. We must be compatible, Yeah,
it's kind of funny when like people on our side of Twitter. I remember some tweet that someone put out that was making fun of this, but like our side of Twitter, that's like, how do I make my GF more racist? How do I expose her to the JQ? It's like just calm down, bro. Just it doesn't have to be like that. How do I find
that shit does happen? It's by osmosis.
Yeah.
And like to be fair, some of that is just like trying to find like a normal girl.
Yeah, I mean, but there's a difference. But it's
Yeah.
I do know what you're saying. Where it's like I'm not like settle for the girl with 100 bodies or anything like that. But you know, some people do take it to the same extent where it's like, you know, the sort of like liberal nerds have that thing where it's like, oh, you know, she doesn't want to have children because of overpopulation. Oh, she's so smart and liberal, and you know, vote for Bernie. And you know, some people on our side do have the thing where it's like, you know, I couldn't conceive of marrying a woman if she wasn't at least as anti-Semitic as I am. And it's like,
Yeah, or like, wow, she wants to have lots of kids to save the white race. It's like the inverse of the, yeah, you know.
Yeah. Like some people are just, you know, just that sort of childish mentality of like, it's sort of like a narcissistic thing where they just want to like have sex with themselves.
Yes,
Really what it
definitely.
is. Just beat off, nigga. It's you don't have to find someone just like you. If you want to have sex with yourself, it's I don't know. Don't have to go a roundabout way.
It's like it's the thing about porn is that because porn lets you select exactly what you're looking for, or at the very least lets you think you are. There's a lot of curation of consumer tastes in pornography, and it's done in a very clever but also like very overt way. But like at the very least, people think that they're selecting what they're looking for, that they have their specific tastes and so forth. If you're first, and this is unfortunately the case nowadays with a lot, I would honestly think it's most guys nowadays. If your first experience of sexuality is just pornography, like the way that makes you think about sexuality just from the start is very one-sided. It's like, oh, I can find a girl that has all the things that I want. It's not necessarily about just finding a girl who is good for you. It's about finding a girl who has like all the things, like basically just simulating the experience of clicking 100 videos until eventually you come to one.
Yeah, it's like, especially like, I mean, it's upsetting. Like, because I don't know when like I stumbled across pornography when I was like 11 on accident.
It was later for me, man, but like I know what you fucking mean.
And yeah, like the shit, like especially like, you know, people of our age cohort. I mean, the shit is just like ubiquitous. Like, you know, there's no way of getting around it. It's like, you know, the people, you know, even if it's like not on like some sort of porn site, like people actively remember when like Tumblr took porn off their site and like everyone like all their users freaked out, and it's like, no, I mean, like, no, maybe there should be some place on the internet that isn't just like filled with like, you know, hentai commissions and shit like that.
Yeah,
like maybe, you know, people should be able to use mainstream social media and just not be bombarded with pornography. I don't know, it's a coomer world, we're just living in it.
Yeah, like I had an interaction earlier today with one of those people, like the tranny hentai commission types. You know, like it's a very I don't have much to say about these people, if only just because I think they're so disgusting. But like it is like an increasingly like avant-garde and more or it was avant-garde previously, but it's becoming less avant-garde because it's becoming more ubiquitous. Like the like hentai instead of pornography is becoming more prevalent, and the whole hentai culture too. Like there is like a culture to it. Like you said, it's primarily like the whole commission culture. It all stems from artists.
You know, I mean, I don't have much to say about this topic. It's like, I don't know. I can only repeat myself. It's a coomer world.
Part of it.
For better or for worse.
In our time.
Yeah, like I admit I have more to say on this issue than most people, because like I have had friends who are like specifically in like the hentai internet subcultures. I've known a few people who are very into that shit. Like the types of mental illness that it spawns, like more than a few of them have become trannies. One guy I know was dating a tranny at the time, and to my knowledge, he still is. It's just like the land of like sexualized androgyny. Yeah, that's like ultimately what it tends towards.
Yeah, no, like we can get into that a little bit, but it's like I do think like mental illness, like the amount of mental illness that's just like spawned by overusing the internet and like tying it to your sexuality is what's causing all these like fucked up, you know, like transsexuals and whatever, you know, all that stuff is just people tying their sexuality to like this unreal thing, and then just being led by that, to wherever that goes, to where that goes is knee-high socks, and that's not good. You don't want to be going there.
Yeah, no fucking way, man. It's like a good question for these trannies, and because none of these people, none of these trannies within this thing, right? This whole like gay internet hentai thing, and none of them know what they're doing. They just do it because it feels right, because they have a fetish that's led them in a certain direction, and they can't help but follow it. Yeah, because their entire the entire culture that they're in is just based on indulging. It's just like increasingly just like lowering your resistance to indulgence until eventually you're cutting your dick off because it makes sense.
Yeah, they're like cattle being led by a ring around their nose, just by their own desires, and it's like because there is like this thing in the culture of like any intrusion on someone else's quote unquote bodily autonomy is like a violation of liberty, and there's like this hyper focus on like pushing the definition of liberty into like its farthest extent. But it's like not to go all Michael Jones, but it's like there's not much liberty in being completely governed by not just your passions, but by like your these sort of like pathological desires that have been created by like internet addiction or
the out of control like dopamine feedback loops. That's like really what it is. It's literally just like the way in which like trannies develop on the internet is they watch porn, and they watch increasingly depraved porn to more and more fill in to more and more cater to their increasingly blown out dopaminergic systems, until eventually they kind of fall into this feedback loop of ideation, where no longer can they rely on like the sensory experience of pornography, and they have to develop an ideation in their minds to eroticize the very experience of pornography. That's how it is for trannies. Like the whole AGP, like Autogynephilia thing, like it's specifically an ideation of experiencing pornography in a way that specifically like accentuates the feeling of watching pornography.
Exactly. Like so not only like it's like it's not enough that they like watch pornography habitually. They sort of turn their whole life into like this sort of pornographic exercise where they get off on sort of like imagining themselves as a woman, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like so they go and become a woman, and then their whole waking life as they walk out in public dressed as a woman becomes this sort of like sexual pornographic experience. So they're living like this completely pornographic existence. And it's nothing to do with identity.
because the way, and like there's something really like evil and dark about the whole like autogynephilia phenomenon. And you guys know what that is, right? Autogynephilia. Just to be sure, like the fetish of imagining oneself as a woman in a sexual context. Like there is something like really like deeply evil about male sexuality in this way, because like this has occurred to literally every guy, I think, and like in their heads, to literally every guy, regardless of their regardless of their exposure to pornography. And it's like, what if I woke up in a woman's body, not in like a transsexual way, but just like, wouldn't that be hot?
Like that is some exercise kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. And it's inherently erotic. And it's not something that the normal guy entertains, though. It's not something that he goes out of his way and goes like, oh yeah, that'd be so awesome, because normal guys actually have a lot of affection for their masculinity. They like being men, and they're not liable without like this absolute like just like bludgeoning of their dopaminergic systems to completely forgo who they are and like what they are for the sake of like fulfilling these increasingly depraved fantasies in their head. But like just in like the mere act of, how do I put this? Just in the mere act of consuming pornography, you feminize yourself. Like you remove yourself as an active component and make yourself passive in that way. You are now the one being pleasured. It's inherently feminine in and of itself. It's not even dependent upon the type of material you're consuming. It's just, it slowly turns you into a woman.
Yeah, the subject becomes the object.
Yes, exactly.
Because I get what you mean. You're like you're not engaging in the sexual act. You're sort of like or like sort of a fake version of the sexual act is being like you're receiving it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in that sort of way, but sort of going back to like the transsexual thing and how it's like, you know, most men enjoy their own masculinity. A lot of the transsexual thing is like having to do with men that like fail in their masculine aspect, so they despise their
Yes.
masculinity because
Or
they
have
don't-
just never had any interaction with it.
whether it's sort of like the creative aspect of masculinity, sort of like, you know, going out into the world and like doing things with your hands and like sort of having like a productive, like that sort of, or
The finance mindset.
exactly, the finance mindset, or like or the sexual aspect of masculinity, like sort of like a lot of losers that sort of like let life, you know, sort of like a sailboat on the harbor, just being taken wherever the current takes them, like sort of just like taking life as life dishes it out, like sort of this like real receptive, effeminate, like, you know, failing to be a man. So those sorts of like transsexuals despise their own masculinity because a lot of them are like sort of like, you know, losers, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, so they can't identify with their own masculinity because they failed, because that aspect of them, you know, they haven't built that up. Like they're unmasculine people. So they engage in what they think is like, oh, that means I'm a woman. That they live.
And like this again goes back to like I don't think I actually said the question, unfortunately, but like the question you can ask of like AGP style like loser incel trannies, because these are actually like the real incels, like the people that are like spiritually incels so fucking bad that they become women basically.
If I could just interject, did you see that one of the people in TFW No GF came out as a transsexual?
Yes,
I mean, if that's literally not proof of what I'm saying, it's just sort of like, you know, I don't want to be mean because, you know, but it's like sort of like the loser sort of like failed in that aspect of what it means to be a man, like, oh, that means I'm a woman, you know, instead of being a transsexual. Like, you know, the one of the main characters, one of the main people in TFW No coming out as a transsexual. It's, you know, it's hard to believe, but at the same time,
but it's fucking perfect.
It's obvious at the same time.
Yeah, but like the question like that I'm leading into, that like you can ask of these people that they cannot answer. I've done this myself. Like I said, I've known these fucking people before, and they cannot answer this question, and it frustrates them. It endlessly frustrates them. Ask them what it means to be the sex that they want to be, like what it actually means to be a man beyond looking like one. And even like in looking like one, and like they can't even explain why looking like a man is like being a man, you know, or why looking like a woman is like being a woman, or what it means to be a woman beyond looking like a woman. They cannot explain these things, and it either has never occurred to them, or they're just so androgynized that the very concept of being a sex aside from in an erotic capacity has never occurred to them. So their entire perspective on sexuality is just aesthetic. But like what does it actually mean to be a man? Like like to some degree it means that you're ready to fucking die. To some degree it means that you have coped with your own disposability. It means that you understand that you have to put yourself in situations, you know, like you were saying, Gree, with like how you have to like make things happen as a guy, and like failure to do that is sort of like being a woman, you know, like these things they don't understand, and they cannot attest to at all, because the sexuality or being a sex, being a gender is just an aesthetic. I mean, that's definitional to what a gender is, and that's how they regard sex. It's just gender. Gender is an aesthetic of sexuality. So when they say they're transgender, it just means they're trans aesthetic, and the aesthetic itself is nothing. It's not what it means to be to be a man is not to adhere to the aesthetic of being a man insofar as what you dress or what you look like or what your hormones are. That's nothing with what it has to do, and they do not understand that. It's anathema to them at a very deep level.
I think I can't recall if it was Pogli or someone similar to that, but they described like the like female creative act versus the male creative act, and the female creative act is internal and has to do with childbirth and like forming a child within your womb is the female creative act. So like things related to that, the femaleness is like having to do with internal and things close to you, and sort of like a hearthiness and like the domicile and those sorts of like related things, and it's sort of like concentric themes sort of related around that aspect. While sort of like male creativity, like the penis is an external organ, it has to go like going out to hunt or going out to find a mate, and sort of like this
Yeah,
external,
it's the spear.
yeah, the spear, like this external expansive force that is the male creative energy. So like creating a great work of art that is external to you, that's like can be gazed, like you can look at a painting, even after the painter has died. It's an external creative act. It's just like, it's one of the reasons why I think it was partly because I think she went into how this is why women never made good artists, because they have to be sort of like lesbians, like Sappho was, where they sort of identify with the male creative act, where it's like because the idea of creating something external to yourself sort of runs against sort of the female, like what females, I shouldn't say females, what women internalize as being their natural creativeness.
Yeah, she also said, a woman simply is, but a man must become. Masculinity is risky and elusive. It is achieved by a revolt from woman, and it is confirmed only by other men.
Yeah.
And so when you transgenderify, you're basically reverting to like an atrophied state.
Exactly. And like the zygote, like, all, in that form, all zygotes like sort of like start off like physically female and then like grow into being male, and sort of like the Greeks had this sort of concept of like trying to understand like the male form in a way that like it didn't make sense to them, like the penis didn't make sense, because like that's why they had to sculpt the penis very small on Greek sculptures, because it didn't really fit onto like their sort of classical ideals of like symmetries and stuff like that. It just seems sort of like like a ludicrous afterthought, sort of appended. But that is sort of like that is sort of like what it means to be male, sort of like having aspects to you that are like appended on, and sort of like this sort of like becoming something else. And
so it's the act of having a weapon. It's like I said with the spear. Like it's like to be a man is to like metaphysically be a spear, and to be a woman is like metaphysically to be like a vase or a womb or a flower.
Or a hole.
Or a hole. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But that's enough Lacanian bullshit for one episode. That's enough. That's enough of Pogli's nonsense. But yeah, what you were talking about before was sort of the transsexuality, not understanding what it means to be, or like if you try to ask them what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, you did bring up two really good points, where they either have maleness or femaleness relating to fashion, or styles of presenting. So like the sort of the stereotype, like the college girl that chops her hair into a bowl cut and makes herself look intentionally unappealing, and then calling herself a man. Or I'm genderqueer because because I do my makeup in a certain way.
Yeah.
And that's more, I feel like there's like a big difference in like provenance, where like sort of like the females becoming quote unquote genderqueer, whatever, and men becoming women. I think the sort of the origins of those things are very different. Like with men, it seems to be like a failure to be masculine and reverting back to like this collapsed state, like Blaugeist was talking about. And so like to them, what does it mean to be a woman? Oh, I fantasize about behaving like a woman in the sexual act. That's to them, that's what it means to be a woman. It's all to do with fantasies. But with like these women presenting themselves as like non-binary, etc. stuff, it has to do with like fashion and being irreverent, mostly I'd say, but also sort of like a hatred of like their own femininity and like not wanting to be alluring. And a lot of those girls have like, they were either like raped like their freshman year in college. And I don't want to be mean to these people because obviously that's a horrible thing. But sort of like their coping mechanism is to like gain weight or make themselves look unattractive, or realizing
revolt against a thing that like they think made themselves vulnerable.
Exactly. Like realizing that their femininity is a draw, so they eschew their femininity. Like their femininity is like, means being leered at, and that equates to danger. And if like something traumatic happens to you, then it's sort of like taking the bait out of the trap, making myself look unappealing, and therefore I'm not vulnerable in that way. So I think they're very different things. Like they're lumped together because like the LGBTQ plus all the letters of the thing that they lumped together. These are all very different things.
Yeah.
Like being a lesbian is like the what causes that is different than homosexuality in men.
Yeah.
Same thing. Like
they're similar only in their deviance.
They're similar only in the fact that they're abnormal. But like, you know, the sort of acronym obfuscates the fact that like all of these things arise from very different circumstances, and they have to sort of like analyze as discrete things.
Yeah.
Like I will say this, like you like there is like a very there's a similarity between like male and female transsexuality, like, you know, male to female shit and female to male shit, you know, and like they're both like revolting against, like, in some way against the aspect of their original sex that they thought they were slighted by. Like, you know, with the loser who can't, the loser guy who basically can't make life work for him, so he basically becomes the sex that doesn't need to make life work for them. Or the girl who, like you say, gets raped or gets leered at or whatever and doesn't like it, so she revolts against that aspect of her original sex that makes her leered at, that makes her desirable in that way, and therefore subject to like the negative externalities of being desirable. You know, like they're both similar in that they're both revolts against like those aspects, like I said, of their original sex that they feel slighted by.
Yeah, it's like revolting against like sort of like biological truths, but also I'm not quite sure how to put this, but sort of like sort of unchosen conditions, and sort of like this desire to control one's destiny, you know, beyond any sort of like wishing that there's no such thing as a prior, or wishing that nothing's given in the world, that, you know, and sort of like trying to construct the world and reality to fit what is mental, sort of like, because like the thing with like Freud and psychology,
it's psychic Platonism. It's psychic Platonism. Yeah,
like trying to construct a world that conforms to the inner and sort of like the mental quote unquote reality, versus configuring the mental to, you know, allow
thrive in the real.
And so it's like because sort of thing with like sort of psychoanalysis and stuff, what sort of like the revelation of that, you know, this isn't just Freud, but sort of knowledge of mental illness throughout history, is that what is mental is not always real, and that, you know, you know, and when the mental deviates sharply from the real, that, you know, that can be considered a mental illness, like, you know, schizophrenics, people that think they're Napoleon.
Yeah,
shit like that.
In some cases, it can be said to be like some sort of enlightenment, though. But that's like specifically with like sort of shamanic rites and like pre-modern civilizations, where like the split of like the mental or like the spiritual from the real is said to be like a sign of enlightenment, but it's under very different conditions than you find in modernity, with people thinking that they're not their given sex.
Yeah, it's like the difference is that is sort of like the shamanistic, like sort of eschewing of the external world for the inner world. That's different than sort of the modern transsexual wanting the outside world to match up with what is.
Well, it's not the inner world that they're eschewing the real for. It's the super world, as like Evola would put it. Back to fucking Evola, you know. But like it is a very good way of putting it. It's like there's the inner world, there's the real world, and then there's the super world. And like it's like the enlightened eschews the real for the super world, and the fucking like depraved eschews the real for the inner world.
We're
damn.
Who would have thought we could have tied Evola into transsexuality?
Dude, I spent a lot of fucking time reading Evola. I gotta get something out of it.
Exactly. For the folks at home, break down what the superworld is.
The super world is okay. So in Evola's whole like parlance, there's his whole idea is big T traditionalism, and big T traditionalism is where everything is oriented towards like this metaphysical super world, and the super world is like metaphysically above the real, and like the inner world is like metaphysically below the real. It's like superior and inferior. the super world is basically that which has become. It's like all aspects of reality that have become, whereas the real world is all aspects of reality that are becoming. You know, it's basically the total realization of being. And like every religion in some sense has every religion has some mythology of what the super world actually is. Like everyone knows Christianity the best, and therefore, and heaven is Christianity's super world. It's the total realization of God's visions, the total realization of humanity's purpose. It's total harmony, and it's total perfect being. It's the termination of becoming. That's what the super world is.
Is that why he called himself a super fascist?
Yes.
Exactly. Sort of like, yeah, the emergent fascist movements, you know, not right wing enough, as Bowden would say, not right wing enough. So, sort of the terminal being at the end of sort of
at the end of history.
At the end of history, Evola stands. Well, you know, whether it depends on what you think of him, but you know that's certainly one way of conceiving.
I wouldn't be here if it weren't for him, man. Like I have my own criticisms of him, but like I would not be where I am, and I think it's in a better place than I was before if it weren't for Evola. Unironically,
I love that so much. Where it's like some people like, you know, my life turned around when I quit drinking. For you, when I read Evola, I was going down a dark path, and I read Evola. Things started fitting into place.
Yeah. It was the first guy I read, or like the first guy that like really impacted me strongly to like basically put this idea in my head that life is that like the struggle of life is a good thing, basically.
Mm-hmm. 7 Habits of Highly Effective Super Fascists.
Yeah, but that's enough Evola. You said enough Paglia. That's enough Evola for now.
we can't drive all the listeners away.
Damaged goods, send them back. I can't work, I can't achieve. Send me back. Open the till. Give me the change you said would do me good. Refund the cost. You said you're cheap, but you're too much. Your sweat so sour. Sometimes I'm thinking that I love you, but I know it's only lust. The change will do you good. I always knew it would. You know the change will